Welcome to Wordcraft Wednesdays. I'm Kathleen Fox, a professional freelance editor and literary agent. Each Wednesday, I aim to provide micro-level advice for writers to help you tighten your line-level writing. Today, I'll be talking about commas. I could literally go on about commas for days, but I am trying to give you guys bite-sized advice, so I'm just going to give you a few helpful tips today. Remember that a well-placed comma can clarify what it is you're trying to say, but a missing or a misused comma can create confusion, and it actually pulls readers out of the story to try and figure things out. And they are my nemesis. So, commas can exist to separate many different things: independent clauses, 3 or more items in a series, introductory clauses, and they can set off non-essential information in the middle of a sentence. They also exist to separate coordinating adjectives. They set off when a character is addressed. They separate parts of a date and also parts of addresses. I'll just leave this right here. I'm just going to talk about the Oxford or serial comma for a moment. I personally am a fan of the Oxford comma, and here's why. Basically, if you don't use it, it can cause confusion, which we never want to do for readers. So for example, if you have a sentence with, let's say, 3 items, I love my cats, Charlie and Ahsoka. This could mean that Charlie and Ahsoka are my cats' names, or it could mean that I love my cats and 2 additional other separate animals or humans. And so without that Oxford comma there, who could know what it means? Wait, what? This is a perfect example of why the Oxford comma is so important. When I'm editing my clients' manuscripts, I typically follow the Chicago Manual of Style, which is all for the Oxford comma, and I can certainly edit projects where the preference is not to use it, but I guarantee there will be eye twitches happening. If you only have 2 items in a sentence, a comma is definitely not needed. So in the example here, the line becomes messy, and it feels dragged down with those extra words and the unnecessary comma. However, if there are multiple items in a sentence, then you do need commas, and sometimes you might use semicolons. They're kind of like a super comma. So I like dogs, cats, and horses. That's fine just with the commas. I like dogs, especially golden retrievers, cats, and horses. So because you have that extra comma internally about the dogs, you need to have semicolons in the rest of them. And you could also use em dashes to add emphasis. I like dogs, especially golden retrievers, cats, and horses. So we have these things called coordinating conjunctions. And I don't know if you remember learning this in school, but the acronym FANBOYS stands for and, nor, boy, or, yet, and so. So when you have these in a sentence, you should be using commas before them. Using or is an example of one of those trickier ones. So a comma is generally not needed unless the or is connecting 2 independent clauses. If it's just being used to connect 2 words or phrases, you don't need the comma. If there are 3 or more items in the sentence, then yes, you use a comma. Then we have which basically introduces a dependent clause that modifies a noun in the main clause. Do you see what I did there? It provides more information. So for example, my office, which used to be in a brownstone, is now in a beautifully restored cotton mill. Haha, I wish. And then of course we have the comma splice. So this is when a comma is used when 2 independent clauses are joined. The comma is not strong enough. It has to be something else, like for example, a semicolon or a comma with a coordinating conjunction. An example of when you don't need a comma, and something that I see all the time, is when there's only 2 words or phrases. So in this case, the comma is not needed. And so here are some examples of commas used in dialogue correctly and incorrectly. This is also very, very common. So of course an action beat is its own sentence. So the dialogue must be closed with a period, and then you insert the action beat. If you're using a dialogue tag, like he said, she said, etc., leave that dialogue open with a comma. A couple of other examples of misused commas: separating a subject from its main verb, and separating a main clause from a purpose phrase. So sometimes I see randomly inserted commas where they're not necessary, and sometimes there are missed commas. And it just basically makes it feel unnatural when you're reading it. So my advice is always to read your story out loud. Don't feel silly doing it. It's actually a really good way to catch all kinds of errors, not just commas. But see if any lines sound off because of a misplaced or missing comma. And if it doesn't sound natural, make the appropriate change. At the end of the day, it's important not to overuse commas. So if the meaning is clear, then it's likely not needed, especially in fiction. You can intentionally use or not use a comma, which will impact the voice on the page. Whatever you do, make sure it's intentional. And there you have it, folks. There's some comma tips for you. I hope that this mini tutorial on commas was helpful to you. And if you enjoy these little bite-sized line-level writing tips, hit that like and subscribe button below, and I will be back with more next week. And in case anyone is curious, here are those two adorable kitties that I referenced earlier.